Good afternoon, evening, morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the third round, high atop Polish Hill. At America's only, I don't know, I still haven't confirmed that, but America's preeminent bar-based political talk show. I'm your host, Pat Clark. Also, actually, last night I was your host, your announcer, Tony Delmont, your hometown roller derby announcer. But that's a different issue.
Story.
It's a different show. Today I'm Pat Clark, and I'm joined today by actual journalist Chris Potter, senior executive editor of Pittsburgh City Paper, and it's too nice a day. All of our other Kahari Mosley, Kate Fink, all the usual crew are either in Philadelphia or having a nice time on a lovely day.
Sun.
And we are joined today by a special candidate and elected official currently guest, Patrick Dowd, candidate for
City Council.
District 7, my district.
Is that 7?
I'm a borderline, so I'm a constituent. And as I pointed out, I am not in any regard a journalist, so in all fair disclosure, I've actually door knocked for this candidate.
Many thanks.
You're welcome. And on a miserable night, a day, or I don't know,
It was back in the winter, it was all dark.
Blended, it was all dark, 24 hours. But nonetheless, we're going to put on our objective hat today. Just sit here trying to shut up and not take a biased position. But nonetheless, we are here today. So, first question, Mr. Potter, would be yours as the official journalist.
So, Mr. Dowd, it seems like the biggest campaign issue in this race so far has been the fact that there has not been but the one debate that I know of between you and Mr. Bodak. I understand there were some campaign events just in the past couple nights.
Yep.
Did Mr. Bodak show up to those events?
Nope, Councilman Bodak did not show up to any of the events other than the one that you're referring to, which was in February, at the very end of February. So that was the only debate that we've had. We've, of course, been out knocking on doors, and I've knocked on just about 3,000 doors, 2,900 and something doors as of today. And we're going to keep going on that pace. And we've been out, at public events. We've been out at candidate nights and all sorts of things. So, but he's only shown up for the one.
And I think
not even the Post-Gazette editorial.
Fair disclosure, and Post-Gazette is one thing, but here on the third
right, not
round,
even
we issued invitations, as I recall, Mr. Potter.
Well, Mr. Bodak did, for the viewers at home. Mr. Bodak told a reporter from the City Paper, Violet Law, that he does not campaign in bars, which would make him the first Pittsburgh politician to be able to make that claim if it were true.
Polish Hill is his district currently, right?
It currently is.
And
yes. It's actually also my school board district.
he's unaware that there are bars in Polish Hill then.
Or if he is, he monastically chooses not to campaign.
Well, God bless him, but we will stick here in bars, and fortunately we have at least one candidate to talk to us about that.
Let's just jump right to the issues, and I'm almost afraid to argue with you because I understand that arguing with you will make me a jackass, judging by what Mr. Bodak has said to Violet Law in our paper.
That's true.
One of the issues that came up in the February forum and that has come up just in conversations I've had with people since then is, okay, so Pat Dowd, school board member, and yet when you look at the school board and the school's performance in recent years, there have been all manner of trouble, just in terms of whether you're looking at sort of fiscal issues, whether you're looking at performance issues in terms of how students are competing with districts outside the city.
Right.
Why would we put this guy who's been part of a troubled school board and a troubled school district, why would we put that person in a city council post?
That's a great question. So basically a question about my record, and I would suggest actually that when I took office, the school system wasn't even beginning to address any of the problems. When I took office, the people who were on the board before me, particularly my predecessor, were focused primarily on things like dealing with peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and housewife special budgets, and you guys can go back and remember some of those things. And it was a difficult.
Do you have something against peanut butter and jelly sandwiches?
No, I clearly don't. But that's not what we have. A 520.
The people demand to know, Mr. Dowd.
It's a $525 million budget. There are things that we should be focused on other than peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and other than things like whatever. So the goal for me when I took office was to try to get the school board focused on building a system that was educating kids, to get its finances in order, and to be responsible for primarily changing the relationship between the board and the superintendent. You'll recall that was just a disaster back then. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is the work that I did to establish a new contract between the board and the superintendent that holds the superintendent accountable for the performance of the district. And that kind of relationship, that performance-based contract, is now a sort of standard for the administration, and will be at the end of this year. Standard is all the way down as far as the level of principal, so into the buildings of each of the schools. So that's a system change, and you are beginning to see performance changes as a result of that kind of focus, but those things take a long time. The second thing you mentioned as far as finances, let's just be really clear about this. Before I took office, the board and administrations of previous times, when they ran into financial problems, their solution was to raise taxes. We'll recall a very large tax increase, 4 or so years before I took office, and we were getting ready for that kind of problem. When I took office, the budget that I first voted on was $525 million. The most recent budget that I voted on was $528 million. So, in other words, over 3 years, we've been working very hard to hold the line with finances, and we've had to do that. We've been able to do that because we've been making very difficult decisions about, particularly around the operation of the school district, how to be more efficient and effective with taxpayer dollars. And so I would take those same strategies as far as working together with, in this case, council members, as far as building strategies for reinvesting in our city, and as far as dealing with the finances of the city. I would take those same strategies. And I disagree with you about the performance. I mean, we can talk about some of those things.
We can. Let's just jump to this question, though, of when you came onto the school board, there was an issue of fractiousness, as you said, between the board and the superintendent. I think there's a concern out there in the world that we have the opposite problem in city government right now, that we have a mayor's office and we have a city council that's not doing enough to kind of hold his feet to the fire on a number of issues.
They're actually dating. Is that right?
I wonder if that's how everybody would characterize that relationship. Well, look, it's the same.
So
it's the same
whether
thing.
You think that that's true, and whether you yourself. I mean, how do you assess the mayor's performance, and what, if elected, would you do to act as a kind of check and balance against the administration?
So let's be clear that these are very different structures. I mean, the beauty of being on the school board is that you get to elect or select your executive. We support, and we brought to town a superintendent. So you get to pick your leader, basically, your executive. On the city council side, you don't have that luxury. City council has to work with a person who's been elected by the entire city of Pittsburgh. So that person has, in his or her own right, a significant amount of sort of backing from the public and authority from the public. So this is a much different a much different sort of structure, and you have to see the city council as a balancing agent, as a legislative body that's responsible not for derailing or advancing solely the mayor's agenda, but rather balancing out that citywide perspective with the needs of the individual districts, while at the same time thinking about the city. So I think we need a stronger city council, not to derail the mayor, but to in fact add sort of stronger voices and add different viewpoints to the mayor's agenda, or even to change the mayor's agenda, depending on what.
Are there places where you think the mayor's agenda needs to be added to, or even derailed?
I think ultimately I'm just going to stick with the messages of the campaign. I'm not. No, I think that's important. You don't run for multiple offices. You stay focused on what you're trying to accomplish. And when we've talked to people, I've knocked on thousands of doors and talked to thousands of people. When we talk to them, they're interested in a number of things. They want to see a city council, and therefore I think also a city government that's going to advocate around public transportation, and that's going to start using its power in whatever ways possible to change the nature of public transportation, and let's just say transportation in general in the city, public and otherwise. They want to see sort of a greater discussion of housing and reinvestment, hopefully, in the housing stock in the city of Pittsburgh. We've talked about that before, so that's an important part of this. And there are also obvious issues around finances and around government reform itself that city council can bring.
So just jumping to this transit issue, I mean, obviously the Port Authority is a county agency.
Right.
City government, city officials have absolutely no official say in that stuff. I mean,
So the city government and city council in particular needs to start taking a stronger view of transportation. Let's start talking about traffic flows. When I was just knocking on doors in Lawrenceville today, and one of the issues that folks are always talking about, whether it's in Lawrenceville, it's in Bloomfield, Friendship, all over the district, is the emergence of the new Children's Hospital and what that's going to do for all of those neighborhoods as far as traffic flows. And so in every project that we're doing here in the city, whatever it is, somehow transportation's related to it because people have to get to and from that project. And we have got to start. I know, it's amazing. All those years in school. So we've got to find a way. We've got to find a way actually to start thinking about that. A good example of the kind of work that I've already done on this, we could take the Bakery Square project, which came up for a TIF at the city council, passed unanimously, came to the school board. And I voted against it, as did a number of my colleagues on the first pass-through, because here's a project where they wanted to get from the taxpayers $15 million or so to build a parking garage. A parking garage that's, with a good arm, you could hit the busway, and it's right next to a huge nexus of traffic for inflow and outflow for suburbanite commuters, right? Why not find a way to take that project, leverage the federal dollars that are out there and so on, and build a larger parking garage, maybe with less city dollars, that can help suburbanites get into that parking lot, onto the busway, into the downtown area. Those are the kinds of things that we've got to be thinking about, not just trying to think about the Port Authority. There are all sorts of other ways that we can do that, although I do think that's an important part of this. But there are other parts of the transit question that we need to be addressing. Bikeway is another thing.
What worries you most about Luke Ravenstahl?
I think that what he's going to ultimately need is a council that's going to have some legitimacy. For a long time, council's responsibility has been, I don't know, I'm not really clear what they're proudest of. And there are some folks on city council who are thinking about what's right for the city and what's right for their particular district, and who are trying to work with the mayor. But I think ultimately, the stronger the council that we build, the stronger the mayoralty, the stronger the mayor. In that case, then the stronger Ravenstahl will be, as far as having again a legislative body to work with.
So you're talking about a Bob O'Connor council that essentially took the mayor to task when they needed to be taken to task about it.
If it's going to be needing to take the mayor to task, that's one thing. Or it could also mean, look, you want to do this particular project here. Have you thought about this? Or the constituents in districts A, B, and C have these issues over here. That those voices need to be added to the project. And ultimately, then it's not a conflict. You're just trying to drive legislation that's in the best interest of the city.
Are you giving any thought to, say, city-county merger? I noticed in the paper today that Jim Rohr said that by 2008, they had some fancy half-sentence phrase for it, but basically said, "Oh, that's all going to be done by then. The city-county thing it's all going to be efficient." What do you think?
Thanks
about
for letting
that?
us know, Jim. Thanks. I want to say that.
Thanks for cluing us in.
I think in one sense it's inevitable. Right, it's inevitable. If we don't find a way to address the fragmentation of government in the region, and it's not a panacea. Solving that problem isn't going to solve all the other problems. But if we don't find a way to solve it, we are certainly going to be in trouble. We essentially have, dozens and dozens of little tax bases that are trying to suck from those little tax bases the revenues necessary to support the services, and it's ridiculous.
But you're describing something that is beyond. You said dozens and dozens. City-county merger that takes municipal.
So what you do is you work to get the city and its financial house and its service house in order. As long as we're paving roads based on who you know on your street, we're not efficient and we're not effective, for example. So you've got to start redesigning the delivery of service, make sure that we're more efficient, more effective. We've got to deal with the finances, and that's not going to be an easy situation. But as we do that, we can then become sort of the hub of the region and start to do more of the things like selling our municipal trash collection service to places like Wilkinsburg. And it's, as districts become more and more burdened by the No Child Left Behind law, hopefully, if the Pittsburgh Public Schools are in the right place, they're going to be able then to help and support and maybe even bring into to the fold other school districts. The same sort of thing with city government and other municipalities. So it's inevitable.
Well, there's a serious concern, as you may have come across. A lot of folks, especially, I've just talked to folks in the African American community, have a serious amount of concern about what a consolidation would mean for their own political power, because they basically feel like that would be diluted in a sort of
tremendously.
Well, yeah, and you can look at Indianapolis as an example of how that
absolutely
has a huge political impact.
So, here's the thing: you're talking about it from a representation standpoint, and I think I don't actually have an idea as to how we're going to design that model. For me, the first thing to do is to get the city's house in order, to make sure that we're focused again on better delivery of services and a more efficient finance system, as well as, again, let's build a transportation system and network inside the city that people want to be a part of. Ultimately, our goal, the city-county merger piece is solved when we get people to want to move back into the city, or that are here to stay in the city. That's the solution.
Let's talk about the fiscal stuff. What is your assessment right now of the city's finances? Because on the one hand, you hear people who say,
plenty of money.
We're in great shape, everything's great, we're on an upward path. And on the other hand, you have a lot of people who are saying, look, we're in the eye of the storm here, and we're going to get worse. The back end of this. So what's your perception of the health of that, and what do you propose doing?
Eye of the storm. Using using your words, we're in the eye of the storm. We've refinanced the debt recently, and we're going to look at payment increases for long-term debt out 5 and 10 years of not $5 or $10 million increases in a single year, but $15, $20, $25 million single year increases in long-term debt. And that's completely unacceptable. If we don't start trying to resolve those issues today, when those increases hit us, what are you going to be left with? What options do you have? So we've got to start tackling those problems. We have pension issues.
Sure.
That's a tremendous problem. That's another case where we can start to build alliances. We're not the only municipality. We're not the only local government that has those problems. So we can start to build alliances if we can communicate outside our borders with other elected officials and start to build those kinds of relationships.
Well, that's a good point, because one of the things that's always struck me as kind of weird is that we're a little island in the stream. That is what we are.
On a Sunday afternoon in Goose.
And yet we are one of, I don't know how many, you're the journalist, Act 47 municipalities in the state of Pennsylvania. How come we never talk to each other? Like, because we have similar issues, even though like one may be in, say, an entirely Democratic district and the other might be in a very Republican district.
To his credit, and I mean this is important, Ravenstall called, and I don't know what came out of this, but there was a moment where he brought together other local municipalities and their leaders who have pension issues. I don't know what came out of that. I haven't seen anything. But hey, let's start thinking along those lines. Let's start thinking about public transportation as not just Pittsburgh's issue, but the region's issue. Let's start thinking about pensions, et cetera, and building those alliances to change the laws that we know need to be changed. How about gun control? Here's another thing.
Whoa. We're not talking about gun control.
Right, there's a moratorium on that for at least a week.
For the Democrats, absolutely.
Right, yeah.
All right, go ahead, talk.
Sorry, no, it's okay.
Hey, if you want to get crazy, talk about gun control. Nancy Pelosi is going to be down to your house like a ton of bricks up.
Okay. Well,
anything you say may be used in a YouTube ad against you. I want you to understand. If you're going to open up this gun control door, I mean, clearly Pittsburgh has been well behind the curve when you compare us to, say, Philadelphia, where there's been a lot of
and we've been totally suffering for it. I mean, you read the paper yesterday about how the Allegheny law enforcement
easy for you to
are completely overwhelmed with what's been going on in the last week. There's been a ton of violence.
So let's talk about this. I mean, do you think there's a place for a city council or some kind of local municipal ordinance?
Yeah, so ultimately the city has a voice. The city should be working to use that voice to make the changes necessary. Our gun laws are going to be different from gun laws in other parts of the state, and they're clearly, we're going to have allies across the state. Let's leverage those alliances on those kinds of issues and find ways to address that. I don't necessarily, this is a thing about a city council member as well that I think is important. You're not necessarily the person who has all the answers. Your responsibility is to bring together those people who are the experts. Let's take a look and see what's happening in other cities across the Commonwealth. Let's look at other cities that are like ours across the country. Let's see what our violence numbers are. Let's look at our gun issues and then look at our laws and see where there are differences, and if we could make some changes, what that might do for us. Those are the kinds of things, again, my opponent's the chair of the Public Safety Committee. Those are the kinds of things, after 4 years of service, we should have been able to at least know, our laws are good. We don't need to make any changes, or here are the changes that we need to make. Instead, I haven't seen, but a couple things from him. So I actually honestly believe there's work to be done there.
But you yourself don't have a sense of what local ordinances should happen.
Let's talk about registration. Let's talk about. I'm interested in what happened with the giveaway. Remember, there were a few years ago, the police had an amnesty day where they could bring people.
Turn in guns.
Yeah, those kinds of days. Let's take a look at those.
That was
a huge success. Have we done that again? I don't know. Let's take a look at some of those pieces. Let's talk about who can buy guns in the city, who can carry guns in the city. I think that's clearly different from the other parts of the state or other parts of the.
Well, if I may, all politics is local. So take that, Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi on gun control. Let's bring up choice. Let's bring up privacy. Yep. This is a current issue because it looks like this is clearly in the process of being punted back to the states and local municipalities.
This is the time.
And often on those listservs we see, choice has nothing to do with local politics. Tell me how it does.
This is a totally local issue. So we're talking about a woman's right to choose, and we're talking about it doesn't get any more local than the individual, first of all. And this is, you read the court decision from the Supreme Court, and we're seeing the emergence of a new sort of this new paternalism, right? This idea that somehow women have to be stopped from making decisions because they'll regret them down the road. And I've never seen or heard anything of the sort. I haven't read the decision yet. I'll look forward to reading it. or not. But clearly,
Is that the Dred Scott decision? Sorry, I missed.
it is a dreaded decision in some ways. But I think when we talk about the local ordinances, look, we have our own ordinances that are designed to protect people as they walk to and from certain places of business, certain places where they can get assistance.
You're referring, just to cut
So
through
let's-
here,
yeah, let's
we're
talk-
talking about the buffer zone.
The
that
buffer zone.
surrounds, women's health.
Women
clinics.
health what where you can
you
not
get
only
the
go
question
to
and
what a
other-
lot of people are concerned about, abortion procedures, but you can also go to get assistance about sexually transmitted diseases. You can go to get information and updates and ideas about birth control. You can go to get assistance in all sorts of ways. And yet, the interview that I had for one of these organizations, Planned Parenthood, there were people out front. They were clearly not observing that. They were clearly not, following what needs to be done. This is a law that the city enacted, and it needs to be enforced. And my opponent voted against it. We have got to stand up on the localist of levels and say this is not right. We have got to create these opportunities for people to get the information and the services that they need.
I want to jump back because we kind of got into this whole thing about guns and stuff like that to the financial issue.
Yeah.
One on the local level. I mean, granted, some sort of pension solution on a state level probably has to happen, but what on a local level? Assuming we can get nothing from Harrisburg, which seems like a safe assumption most of the time.
About
What on a
finances.
local level? Yeah, on financially. Can we
Let's
do?
start looking at how we provide services. When I took office at the school board, it was very clear that there were efficiencies that could be generated as far as the operations of the school system. I have a hard time believing that there aren't any in the city side. Let's talk about how we're paving roads. Let's talk about how we're bidding out utility contracts and fuel contracts. Let's look at how we're staffing different parts of the city government. Can we do more services more efficiently? Do we have to be this large? I just don't know these answers, but these are the kinds of questions that need to start being asked so that we can find out how best to use the resources. If we need 10 people in one area, let's talk about police officers. Perhaps we need more police officers. Great. Okay, so we need 50 more police officers on the street. Well, where are we going to get them? Are there other areas where we're less efficient, where we don't need as many people? We can shift those resources over to police officers or whatever. But we've got to start getting that house in order. Once we start making tough decisions on the operations side, okay, then we're going to start being supported, I think, as far as the larger pictures around pensions and things of that sort.
Okay, that's a sunny view of
I
what
believe
goes
it.
on in Harrisburg, but I mean, if
Hey,
you're
wait a
an eye
minute.
in
That's the
storm-
record of the school system. Wait, hold on just a second.
sure.
That's the record of the school system. We when I took office, I went in. I remember going. What happened? The board members go up to Harrisburg. We ask for money, and they said, "What are you kidding? We're not giving you any money. You spend this much per pupil. It's way too much money. You've got to get your costs down and do more with less money." And so I said, "Okay." And so we started to do more with less. We started to close schools. We started to look at the central office administration and realized we had too many people in central. We start to be more efficient, and then the state starts to give us. We got $12 million additional support this year. I'm not saying that that's going to happen every year, but the point is you get people to buy into what you're doing because you've made tough decisions and you have a plan for the future.
But if you're talking about the eye of the storm, and if you're talking about pension debt, we're talking about something that's 40, 50 years in the making. We're
it's
talking
huge.
about debts that are hundreds of millions of dollars in size. So
Unfunded by
it seems
hundreds.
it seems
You're
hard
talking
to
about
believe.
debts that are no one's fault.
Right. Well,
Clearly.
or the fault of somebody who
What?
was 40
No,
years.
either.
Yeah.
These are debts that the city government and the city taxpayers are ultimately responsible for
right.
because of bad decisions in the past.
Yeah, but it's
in the
nobody's
past.
fault, though. That's my point, right?
But I want to get on this because there's clearly, I mean, you cannot address 50 years of bad decisions
In one term.
in a year or in an operating budget. And so my question is how do you address some of these huge, just massive legacy problems?
Like anything else, you're going to have to start by making very simple decisions at the outset. Again, you start with the small things and you start to build up. You start to build confidence as a legislative body working with the mayor and so on. You start to make those tough decisions. You start to move the ball forward. You start to do the things that look like you're getting on the right track. And you develop. I think the most important thing is to develop some sort of plan. We all know the pension problem. What's the solution? We haven't seen anything on that. And we need to get to that point, and that's going to involve a lot of different folks. But you can get there. It's not. This is the issues in this particular campaign that the city face. These are going to take years and years to solve. And if we don't start now, and that's really, that's what this election's about. I'm saying I want to make these changes. I'm saying I want to get in there and start working with people to find solutions. My opponent's not saying anything. He's had 4 years to make those changes. He's had 4 years to tell us, okay, we have a pension problem and we need to get together.
Right.
We have financial problems. We need to come together. And he's not. I'm saying, I at least know those problems are there. I'm on record as saying I want to fix them, and that's why I want to be elected. I like to solve these kinds of problems.
What's your sense of the needs? We've talked a lot about citywide issues. What's your sense of the needs of this district, District 7?
Again, the question of the hospital and the children's home and the corridor there on Penn Avenue is a huge and interesting, exciting opportunity, right? But people have this worry. They're not sure how it's all going to come together. They're worried about the inflow of traffic. They're worried about the change in the neighborhoods
And all those sick kids just coming in and
no,
tearing down property
no.
values.
Well, listen, no, they're not. They're not at all. They're interested.
They're just not at all well.
You don't know these constituents at all. Let me tell you. Seriously, I mean, they're excited about them. They see it as an opportunity, but there is this fear that when the housing prices are going to go up, all sorts of issues. What's going to hold this neighborhood together? Okay, as a neighborhood. So those are issues. We can talk about what's going on Butler Street and traffic on Butler Street. What a nightmare. And so there's concern there. In my neighborhood, in Morningside to some extent, but especially in Lawrenceville and Friendship and parts of Bloomfield, this issue around housing. I can't tell you how many times in Lawrenceville people say to me, look at that house. Look at that house. It's a house. We need to get people back in there. I remember so-and-so who lived there, right? And there's this sort of a tearing feeling. These abandoned these abandoned properties in the minds of many of the voters, people who've been around for a while, they say, look, I remember who lived in that house.
They see what once was and wonder why it can't still be.
Exactly. And so again, they're concerned about the crime that's going to take place or that might take place there, but they also see them as a sign of decline. And so those are really prominent issues, and of course public safety factors into that.
So what is the Dowd plan for dealing with those vacant properties?
So we put out a plan. It was the first platform piece that we put out back in February, and I suggested that we start finding ways to reinvest in housing, that we give people incentives to pick up vacant and abandoned properties or other such properties in the city of Pittsburgh. This stems in part from my own experience. Lanny and I, my wife and I, bought a house in Highland Park. It was a real dump of a place. I mean, it's a beautiful structure, but it was rat infested, boarded up, just a mess. And we said, look, let's take this property. It was probably a 911 generator, given what we saw when we were looking at the house. And people, the stumbling blocks in our way were huge. And every time we moved one, somebody else had put like 3 more. And we couldn't understand. We thought people should be at least saying, hey, thank you, that's great.
Take my house, please.
Instead, there are all these barriers. Once we got a loan, which was very difficult, just because of the quality of the house and so on. Once we got a loan, then there were issues about how to renovate it and so on, building permits and things like that. We went through that whole process. It was a mess. So we've got to find ways to change that. We've got to encourage people to reinvest in these properties. We've got to figure out what's happening in the tax lien office and make sure those properties are getting through there faster. We've got to find ways to encourage people to reinvest in the infrastructure of their house. Energy costs. If I put in my heating system myself, if I didn't do that, we would never be able to reinvest in that house. The heating costs would have killed us. How many other people in the city like that? A lot of people like that, and we've got to help folks on those fronts. So those are just and there are a lot of pieces to what I've just said, but I think we can do that. As far as the situation with crime, and that's a big part of what we've got to do. We've talked to a lot of police officers when we go door to door, and a lot of them are telling me that there are issues about how we're distributing the police force. We probably need more police officers on the street, but then there's and my opponents, every chance he's gotten to rehire laid off police officers, voted against them. We've got to find a way. We've got to find a way to make sure that we are bringing police officers onto the streets when we need them, and not only that, but that we're redistributing them as necessary, so that we're in a zone system. Are we spreading our resources too thin if we're asking people to cover neighborhoods with a variety of crime statistics, right? Should we try to be more specific to those needs or whatever? Again, this is a question. My opponent's been on the Public Safety Committee. There's an opportunity for him to start thinking about how we provide those services and redesign that system.
But isn't there a tension though between saying we need more police in certain areas or whatever, and the fact that the city's financial, as you just sort of pointed out.
It's about efficiencies.
Okay.
It's about efficiencies.
So where is the inefficiency in the system? Do you have a sense?
I don't have a sense, but I guarantee. If you tell me that you think the city of Pittsburgh government is the most efficient operation there is, I think on the face of it, we all know that's not true. Right. And so that the question is, then you have to start asking performance questions, and that's what you do as a council member, and that's how you support. Again, if you were asking about the mayor and the council, that's how you work with the executive. You say, look, what are our performance statistics in this area, that area, and the next area?
Well, this is an important point. I'm reading this week a biography of Harry S. Controversial period or no period Truman. And one of the things that I did not realize, and this is germane to a man who brought on a Roosevelt, I believe,
Yes.
to the school board.
Teddy.
FDR benefited greatly from having a Harry S. Truman on board to essentially toe the line on efficiencies during the war effort. It's arguable that Truman's work on a committee that looked at efficiencies in the war effort made all the differences to whether or not we won that war. All right, so focus, if you can, a close-up on this. I'm going to do my dime thing. FDR. So, taking it from a local level, quit laughing at me, Potter. Taking it from a local level up on a macro level, you find it ironic that in a democratic city, you who brought in someone named Roosevelt would have a hard time getting a party endorsement. Talk to me about the future of the Democratic Party. Is it named Roosevelt or Bodak? And when
I think it's the
fan,
party is a Democratic Party entirely, and I think ultimately there is a need for change and reform in city government. I suggest, for example, that as an elected official, I am not and I will not seek any membership, elected position inside of the Democratic Committee. I'm a Democrat, registered and true, but at the same time, I don't want to be in a position of authority in that entity because I see that as a body, as an organization that holds its party members accountable for how they vote and how they operate. You can't be a ward chair, a ward boss, employing 2 or 3 or 4 of those folks and then expect to be held accountable by that operation. It just doesn't make any sense. So I clearly think we need to find, I don't know the answer to that, but we've got to find a way to make that happen. We also have to start thinking, I think, about the elected officials themselves. Councilman Bodak in February, I think it was in February, maybe January, at the Friendship Preservation Group came up to me. We were working the room together, and but we were working the room at the same time, and somebody said, "You're running for something, aren't you?" And I said, "I'm running for," and he said, "He's trying to take my seat. He's trying to take food from my table." And I said, No, Councilman, it's not like that.
Well, it's called working for a living, isn't
I said,
it?
No, but I said, in all honesty, I said, this is about providing choice to the taxpayers, it's about choice to the citizens, and we're doing everybody a service by doing this. And he kept repeating that I'm taking food from his table. And I think that we've got to get away from that idea that this is my table, this is my position, but rather see it as something that you're doing as a form of service. And for that reason, I suggested that we have a referendum on term limits. It's not to say that I'm a huge fan of term limits, but for me, it's about changing the culture and the way that we view public service. Somebody when I mentioned this at a forum recently, somebody came up afterwards and said, "Look, I don't agree with you on term limits, but I like the conversation. I think that it will drive a conversation. Here are some other things that you might recommend instead." So the point is, let's talk about reforming city government. That's what I want to do.
Campaign contribution limits?
All the way. Yeah. We started the year with 0, and we started on December 15th with 0 contributions. Basically, my opponent, as of December 31st, had roughly $1,000 in the bank. So we were running an uphill battle. We've closed the gap. We're going to be in just fine shape financially. But that's a hard thing. And in a city, and this is really important, in a city where land use questions come up all the time, and you have people that give money as a result of that, right? I actually had to say to donors, look, we disagree. I'm not going to accept that contribution. I'm not going to make that decision in order to accept that. That's not how this works. We've got to change the structure of campaign financing, without a doubt.
Just a couple minutes left, Mr. Potter.
Well, sure. Why don't you just agree to hire Pat Dowd so you wouldn't be taking money from his table? That would be nice, as like a staffer, as a kind of gesture. Will you commit to that today?
No, I'm running for this office clean because we're providing choice again. We're providing choice to the taxpayers.
Mr. Clark, I'm
Any
kicking it to
final
you.
questions, or are we? Okay.
You're running out of steam.
Did we miss any hard hitting?
Well, I will say this. One concern a lot of folks have, and you've sort of been, whether by your will or not, or fairly or not, you've sort of been pushed into this Peduto camp of sort of
I'm glad you brought that.
reformers or whatever. There are a few concerns people have about that. One is, the problem a lot of good government reformer types have is that they do kind of forget on an issue like living wage or whatever
Exactly.
these other issues are, that there are people out there whose top concern is not, do we elect the prothonotary or appoint
Right.
him? And what are you going to kind of do for folks on that sort of level?
So this has been, for me, a very interesting situation. I've never had to deal with this before, but this label or this labeling of candidates is unbelievable. People say, "Oh, you're in this camp," or "Oh, you're in that camp." No, that's not. I think let's take a look at issues down the line And let's stop calling people progressive. Let's stop calling people reformers. There are places where, I think you might say I'm progressive, and places where I'm not.
Where are you not progressive?
I actually think that fiscally, I'm fairly conservative. I'd like to see a change in the way that we look at the finances of the city. But then again, on choice, and I do have issues. The gun control piece is also important for me. I have privacy concerns. I'm deeply concerned around privacy. I think they're outweighed by the need for safety. So those are issues. But anyway, we need to think about that, right? We need to think also about. My sense is that government, and particularly at a local level, its function, its operation is to invest in people. And especially when we think about a workforce going forward, we're not going to build steel mills here in Pittsburgh. We're not going to have industries that are going to employ thousands or hundreds of thousands or even tens of thousands of people. We're going to have lots and lots of small entities, maybe a few big ones, but mainly lots of small entities. And what we've got to do is encourage people. We've got to invest in them. We've got to provide them with quality education and what they need to go beyond. We got to start thinking about healthcare. That's something else that we could talk about. We've got to start thinking about the other quality of life issues so that people who live in a city like Pittsburgh have everything that they need in order to compete out there with the larger world and the larger market. And so in that sense, I also think of myself as, I don't know if that's a very progressive position, right? It's down there on the ground level, thinking about people and what they need on a day-to-day basis.
Well, let me just put it on a street level or whatever. You've got a situation, say, in the Hill District. We're going to build the Penguins a new arena and all that stuff. There are a lot of folks out there who are basically saying, fine, you're going to build the arena, give us some frickin' jobs. Make something happen for us.
Absolutely.
Here. I mean, where are you at with that? A lot of those decisions, of course, will have been made, but somewhere down the line, somebody's going to come looking for a tax subsidy or looking for help from the city. And people are saying, let's put some strings on that. Let's say if we're gonna help you out, we're gonna say there's got to be a living wage attached to all the jobs that are created as a result of that.
So the first thing to go away from development,
Sure.
thing or about development. Any development that takes place in the city should be the city government should have a framework. None of this stuff, as far as tax incentives and tax breaks, should be driven by the developers or by the private market. It should be driven by the city government, and that's actually another part of the reform piece. We've got to turn the model upside down. We're in control of the city. We should be driving. Now we want the market to operate. We want that to be fine. But at the same time, if you're gonna ask for public dollars, there are strings attached. The public dollars aren't going to go anywhere. They're going to go to the parts of the city where we need that. Not to district this or district that, but to the parts of the city where we're losing population or we need to stabilize or whatever. And then when we do that, there clearly have to be strings attached. You want a parking garage? Great. We want you to tie it into the busway, and we want you to make it twice as big so that all those commuters can drive in there as well. Or something. I mean, that's just a simple example of something recently. There are plenty of examples where, clearly there have to be. If we're talking about a living wage, we want to talk about who gets employed or where the jobs come from. Absolutely, those kinds of strings need to be attached. If you're going to do,
you would support that then.
The living wage. I was in a couple of questionnaires. This comes up. I worry about the living wage from a city standpoint because you're going to see bleeding of jobs out into the county and from the county out beyond that. So we've got to find a way again. But you can do this. We have allies, and we can make alliances across the state. You say, okay, here's a city, here's a city, here's a city. We're all supporting this idea. Let's come together. Or here's a set of counties. Let's support this and get it done at the state level so that we don't see population bleed out of the city.
But that sounds to me like you would be against a city ordinance for a living wage.
At the moment I am, until we can find a way to make sure that we're not losing jobs. Because I don't want to see people locate their plants, their businesses, whatever, on the other side of the Allegheny River from where I live. So until we can, and I think there's a way to do that, and that's again about communicating and building alliances, which we can do more of, right? We've only just started as a city. We need a lot more of that.
I guess the issue is
But
that's a broader issue there. That's like, well, okay, down the road we're going to try to form
Chris,
these alliances, but in the next 12 months, some developer or whatever is going to come along to the city and say, I really need $12 million in public subsidies.
I really need to own the center of the city of Pittsburgh.
Right, it's
and
PNC
a
or
subsidy.
whoever it is. I mean, like at that moment, not to say that you couldn't get something in the state down the road, but at that moment, what do? I mean, do you attach that requirement or do you not attach that requirement?
Honestly, I don't.
We're going to bring the jobs to Pittsburgh.
Right. So I don't. I don't know the answer to the specific PNC piece.
Or whatever.
But here's the main concern is to make sure that you're not increasing the incentive to leave the city. The goal of a city government at this point should be to find a way to transform the choice. Now it doesn't. You're not going to say, "Oh, but we don't care what wage." I'm not. Not at all. No. But you can start to make other requirements. I'm interested in your idea of a living wage per project. I'm interested in that. I just don't know about the feasibility. So I'm open.
Right.
But I'd have to look at it. My main concern at this point is that we have a population drain larger than any city in America next to the natural disaster of Katrina. Right. So forgetting that we're the number one. So anything that we do that's going to accelerate that decline is only going to put greater burden on the taxpayers of the city and the citizens and the neighborhoods themselves. So we've got to find a way to reverse that model. It could be the case that is the reversal, right? That changes that. That brings people to the city because we have a living wage.
Right.
Okay?
Or it could be, and this is I think what people worry about, that these projects attract suburban jobs, suburbanites who work at a PNC or whatever, and then you really haven't helped the city per se, but you have traded away money in the city tax coffers to help suburbanites get jobs, and it really still doesn't do anything.
But there's a string that's an interesting string, right? That actually some folks have suggested at the door. When you offer tax incentives for a PNC, anybody really, let's say anybody, let's say that you get a guarantee that those jobs the jobs that you're going to have. Some of those jobs, not in the building of the project, right? Some of those jobs come from are folks who live in this city, right? So that they're actually city taxpayers who are actually contributing and also benefiting from that project.
And this you would favor?
Yeah, I'm interested in that. Yeah, definitely. And that's also again a part of building a bigger vision for what we want as far as the choice model here in the city.
Well, on that bigger vision phrase, wow, this is...
Yeah, the vision thing, huh?
Whoa! We've almost gone 45 minutes. Sorry, folks, for those folks who really are looking for their news in 30-second sound bites.
Is it over yet?
I apologize for being so long, but thank you again.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate your having us.
Candidate Patrick Dowd and guy who used to have the long
Chris
hair.
Potter, yeah, that's all.
Hey, I used to have long hair. I want to confess, we hear that's going to be a slam against me.
Don't pander.
I used to have long hair. I did. I got pictures. Apparently, it's going to be in a negative mailer. So
you got hair like a girl.
Yeah,
that's moly. Well, that's it. That's it. You've heard it here on the third round. The important news: haircuts. We didn't even get to the John Nichols haircut.
We'll have to do that next time. Next time.
So that's Dowd's $400 haircut.
From high atop Polish Hill, right here at Gooskie's.
Cost me 20 cents.
Pat Clark saying, "See you next time. Whatever. God bless." The third round.
You guys are great. I don't think that a living wage outside as just a city piece is a good idea.